The fluorescent lights of Fob Zeus's main logistics cage hummed with the oppressive inefficiency of bureaucracy applied to warfare. Corporal Maria Valdez, authorized but barely noticed, pushed a heavy-duty stainless steel industrial mop bucket, the rolling squeal of its worn caster wheels, the only protest against the morning's stifling silence. She wasn't simply mopping, she was maintaining the operational readiness of the forward operating base's most sensitive storage facility, a place where the allocation of a single NVG battery or a specific grade of chemical solvent could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure on a night patrol. Valdez needed advanced chemical solvents, the specific grade required for complex decontamination protocols following the last perimeter breach simulation, a necessary precaution to neutralize trace elements of explosive residue. Sergeant Kevin Davis, the logistics NCOIC non-commissioned officer in charge, leaned back, his boots propped up on the counter, polishing a freshly issued set of rank insignia. He was the gatekeeper, and he specialized in being an obstacle to efficiency. "Valdez," he drawled, not even opening his eyes, his voice thick with cultivated boredom. "The requisition form, 32-Bravo Delta for Class 7 materials, rejected. Again, standard issue cleaner fluid, same as the mess hall. Use that, you're over-specifying." Valdez stopped the mop, the thick rubber wheels locked on the polished concrete floor, instantly silencing the squeal. Her uniform, though clean, bore the faded, washed-out look of years spent enduring the aggressive sun and industrial laundering of arid climates. She was slight, almost invisible, save for one distinct detail that Davis now chose to fixate upon. A fine, jagged scar traced the upward line of her trapezius muscle, disappearing just beneath the collar of her fire-resistant combat shirt, a mark resembling a stylized pitch-black trident, often confused by the untrained eye for a poorly healed keloid. Davis finally lowered his feet and looked at her, his lips curling in disdain. "What's with the theater, CPL? Got a kink in your spine? Go clean the latrines." "And that scratch on your neck? Trying to look tough, Valdez. Did you lose a fight with a rusty razor? Stop wasting my time." Valdez didn't move. She was trained not to. The cost of acknowledging a fool's words in this environment was too high. That scratch, as Davis called it, was the signature of survival, etched into her flesh during the frostbite hell of a high-altitude mission deep in the unforgiving cold of the Carpathian Mountains, years before she ended up pushing a mop in a U.S. logistics cage. The scar was known in the most restricted circles as the Xani Troizomb, the Black Trident, not a tattoo, but a specific non-surgical tissue trauma mark sustained during her tenure as an attached surgical technician and tactical reconnaissance specialist with Poland's most elite counter-terrorism unit, Jednostka Wojskowa 2305 Fran, better known throughout NATO as GROM. Her current rank, corporal, was a cover, a deliberate act of profound operational obfuscation necessitated by her ongoing intelligence obligations, a deep cover status requiring the lowest possible profile while maintaining critical access to infrastructure points like this logistics hub. Her true calling was never cleaning. Her life began in the suffocating silence of specialized insertion teams, where operational parameters were measured in millisecond tolerances and atmospheric pressure levels. Her highest decoration, the Krzyż Walecznych, the Cross of Valor, pinned twice, wasn't something you displayed on a public logistical ledger. It was a medal earned in unimaginable scenarios of sustained combat stress and extreme personal sacrifice. The first citation was earned in the frozen streets of a destabilized European capital during Operation Red Glacier. The objective was a fortified embassy taken by former FSB Spetsnaz remnants, holding high-level diplomatic hostages. The extraction window was brutally small, 60 seconds maximum, to prevent a retaliatory strike that would escalate the regional conflict. Valdez, then designated Operator 4 Sierra within the Polish chain of command, was the designated primary breaching specialist. She was carrying the MSBS Grot carbine, chambered in 5.56 NATO, customized with a dedicated surefire SOCOM suppressor and a thermal optic overlay, a setup designed for surgical, silent entry in zero-light conditions. The initial thermal charge was set and executed flawlessly, designed to hinge the reinforced vault door. However, the breach was catastrophically compromised by an unforeseen counter-IED measure, a secondary thermite charge designed not to kill the breaching team, but to melt the structural supports of the safe room door, collapsing the ceiling onto the hostages. During the ensuing blinding flash and structural failure, a jagged piece of reinforced titanium shrapnel from the door frame tore through her protective collar and ballistic scarf, leaving the distinctive trident-like mark near her jugular. It was a wound that, had it been a few millimeters deeper, would have been immediately fatal. But it wasn't the wound itself that earned the subsequent commendation. It was the chilling, clinical action she performed while absorbing the trauma. With her primary comms severed, bleeding profusely, and facing two hostiles armed with recently captured AK-12s in a narrow, unstable hallway, she executed a perfect double-tap precision Mozambique drill on the first target, transitioned seamlessly to a single-shot precision neutralization of the second, who was about to execute a hostage tied to a support pillar, and then used the remaining 20 seconds of the extraction window not to prioritize her own survival, but to apply a combat tourniquet to herself, while simultaneously setting up the extraction point smokescreen and deploying a micro-jammer to delay the enemy's incoming reinforcements. Her AAR, after-action review summary, logged in a restricted NATO vault, noted her unwavering commitment to operational silence under catastrophic kinetic pressure. The GROM commander, General Sikora, had personally approved her transfer to deep cover within NATO's infrastructure, explicitly forbidding the disclosure of her true operational history or the display of her commendations. Understanding the strategic value of an experienced operator placed in a low-vis, high-access role, her mandate was simple: observe, gather low-level intelligence, and maintain readiness. Her cover was Corporal Valdez, the custodian. The contrast between her past life, where the smell of gunpowder and hydraulic fluid mixed with adrenaline, and her present routine of pine sol and stale coffee, was a deliberate psychological discipline. She had mastered the art of being background noise. The smell of disinfectant now hung heavy. Sergeant Davis straightened his posture, sensing a captive audience in the few junior enlisted personnel milling around the adjacent supply room. He wanted a show. "Look at her, boys," Davis announced, loud enough for effect. "A corporal pushing a mop, thinking she's too good for standard-issue cleaning agent Alpha 9. You think you're special, Valdez? Let me tell you something about this unit. We respect the supply chain. We respect the rank. And frankly, CPL, your file is thinner than the paper towels in the head. You are violating the protocol of inventory management by demanding specialized Class 7 materials for a Class 9 task. I'm putting you up for a formal NJP, non-judicial punishment, for insubordination and waste of resources. I want to see your 201 file right now. Let's see where you did your basic and why you're scrubbing floors instead of pulling guard duty like a proper grunt." He reached for the access panel to the secure digital personnel files, his finger hovering over the terminal. Davis was confident that he would find a generic record: sanitation specialist, 2 years of service, 0 deployments. He was confident he held all the power. Valdez knew the rules of her cover. She was supposed to comply, to hand over the intentionally vague, civilianized file that placed her training history somewhere generic like Fort Benning, specializing in sanitation logistics. But something in Davis's sneering arrogance, the casual dismissal of the sheer, thankless effort that kept the critical operational spaces of this entire damn FOB running, snapped a wire in her tightly controlled professionalism. She held her ground, refusing to be drawn into the administrative theatrics. "Sergeant Davis," her voice was low, devoid of the emotion she felt, My 201 is classified, but my current orders are valid. My task is decontamination readiness, specifically following the explosive residue containment protocols. Standard cleaner does not meet the specified parts per million, ppm, requirements for C4 residue neutralization, especially concerning the sensitive equipment stored in Bay 4 Bravo. The highly technical jargon, specific to EOD and counterproliferation logistics, sailed miles over Davis's head. He laughed, a short, abrasive bark. C4 residue? You're scrubbing floors, not defusing bombs. You're making up nonsense to sound important. Show me your file now, or I summon the duty officer for a direct disciplinary hearing. This is a refusal of a lawful order, Corporal. The threat hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Davis was already dialing the internal extension, his victory seemingly assured. Valdez braced herself, prepared to initiate her secondary protocol, confess to a generic security breach violation that would necessitate her immediate removal and transfer, thus protecting her deep cover status, even at the cost of a formal disciplinary mark. Before she could speak, the door to the logistics bay, a heavy, sound-dampening blast door, slid open with a controlled hydraulic hiss that cut through the silence like a dropped blade. Every head whipped toward the entrance, momentarily forgetting the confrontation. Standing framed in the doorway was a figure who radiated competence, quiet authority, and barely contained lethality. Major Rex Thorne. Thorne wasn't just an operator. He was the chief instructor for the NATO Advanced Mobility Cell, a joint command specializing in high-value target extraction and specialized force protection. His presence here, at a common logistics center, was highly irregular. Thorne was tall, built like granite, and his uniform bore the distinct shoulder flash of Joint Task Force 2, JTF-2, on loan, overlaid by the specialized unauthorized unit patch of the Quiet Professionals. Most notably, he carried his primary weapon system, an H&K 416A5, customized with the unmistakable proprietary short-stroke gas piston system, pristine, lethal, and never more than 3 feet from his reach. It was an extension of his will, a commitment to readiness that few in the regular forces ever achieved. Thorne walked directly toward the counter, his eyes fixed not on Davis, but on Valdez. He had been checking ordnance manifests, scheduled to depart in less than an hour. He hadn't been paying attention to the low-level noise until he heard the specific highly technical phrase, C4 residue neutralization. That terminology, specific to high-level EOD and tactical cleanup protocols, was not the language of the custodial staff. As he approached, his professional gaze instantly zeroed in on the distinctive jagged scar partially hidden beneath Valdez's collar. The Xani Troizumb. Thorne recognized it instantly. He had only seen that mark once before, in a deeply classified briefing slide detailing operational overlaps between NATO Tier 1 elements, specifically Polish GROM and Canadian JTF-2 assets, operating in sensitive theaters. He saw the mop, the low rank, and the quiet dignity resisting the barrage of bureaucratic foolishness. Thorne didn't ask what was happening. He didn't even acknowledge Davis directly. He walked past Davis, stopped directly in front of Valdez, and spoke in a voice that was low, resonant, and required instant, absolute compliance. "Corporal, stand down." Valdez, recognizing the tone of absolute command authority, the voice of a true field commander, immediately adopted a flawless, rigid parade rest stance. Davis, puffed up on the presence of a superior officer who might witness his disciplining of a junior enlisted member, seized the opportunity. "Major, sir, this CPL is attempting to sabotage my inventory logs and refusing a direct order to present her file. I was just about to report her for..." Thorne held up a single gloved hand. The gesture wasn't aggressive, but it stopped Davis mid-sentence, the effect instantaneous and chilling. Thorne turned to the logistics terminal where Davis had been preparing to pull Valdez's generic file. "Access the terminal. Initiate override protocol 7 Delta Whiskey." Davis balked, suddenly sweating. Sir, I don't have clearance for Delta Whiskey Override. That's a Tier 2 command access level. It requires a 4-star signature key. Thorne didn't look at him. His eyes remained fixed on the console. Use the code, Guardian 9920. Davis hesitated, his logistical procedures screaming internal protest, but the authority radiating from Thorne was non-negotiable, heavy with implied consequences. He keyed in the code. The screen immediately flashed bright crimson, then cycled through a series of rapid, complex decryption protocols that shook the security system. The prompt changed, the white text replaced by glowing amber. Access granted, top secret, NATO JTF Liaison Command. Thorne then typed in the last name, Valdez. The standard civilianized file immediately disappeared, replaced by a densely formatted multi-page classified dossier bearing the highest security designations. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop as the severity of the situation became palpable. Thorne began to read, his voice amplifying just slightly, ensuring every person in the logistics cage heard every syllable. He wasn't reading the logistical notes or the sanitation reports. He was reading her true commendations, translated directly from the Polish military records, complete with operational summaries. "Corporal Valdez," Thorne began, his gaze fixed on the screen, his tone shifting to one of chilling reverence. "Let's review the contents of File Z34 Grom Sigma. Rank, formerly Stasi Sergeant, Senior Sergeant. Current operational designation, NATO Deep Cover Assets. Technical Specialist Level V. Combat Tours. 7 declared, 3 undeclared. Commendations." He paused, letting the silence build, allowing the weight of the previous, fabricated rank to settle against the truth. Davis stood frozen, his face draining of color as the reality of the deep cover status began to set in. The United States Army Commendation Medal, Bronze Star for Valor, Silver Star, Purple Heart, all declared assets, noted in the redacted file. Standard commendable service, but we are not here to discuss the standard fare. Let us discuss the specialized honors, Sergeant Davis. Pay attention. Thorne began reading the Polish citations, the language ringing with the almost mythic gravitas of severe sustained combat. The Krzyż Waleczny, the Cross of Valor, awarded twice. First citation, dated 10th of January 2007, for sustained heroism in direct combat with forces hostile to the alliance, specifically citing the neutralization of a hostile command structure during the stabilization of Sector 4 under circumstances of complete operational isolation, having maintained communication integrity and fire superiority after the destruction of the forward observation post. This action saved 58 lives and secured critical intelligence assets. Second citation, 14th of November 2009, for exceptional valor and operational sacrifice during a high-risk humanitarian aid extraction in a theater declared command and control hostile, involving the use of improvised demolitions and manual deployment of counter-sniping measures to secure an egress route, resulting in serious but non-disabling physical trauma to the operator. Thorne's head lifted slowly. He looked directly at Davis, his eyes cold and unwavering. "This," he stated, "the finality of the word crushing the air, is the origin of the mark you mocked, Sergeant. The Czarny Trójząb is not a scratch from a rusty razor. It is the signature of a specialist who remained operationally effective after absorbing catastrophic shrapnel trauma. She earned the right to wear that scar while executing a complex extraction under fire, while you were still arguing over requisition forms for paper clips." Thorne closed the file on the screen, terminating the sensitive display with a single firm key press. He then slowly, deliberately, released the single-point sling from his neck. The HK-416A5, a weapon engineered for elite war fighters and valued at over $40,000 with its current optics package. The Trigicon VCOG, the proprietary Geissele rail system, the custom trigger mechanism, and the definitive H&K iron sights, his personal professional lifeline, came free. He held the rifle horizontally, the muzzle oriented toward the ceiling, ensuring absolute muzzle discipline and safety, though the message of lethality was unmistakable. He took 3 silent steps toward Corporal Valdez, his boots making no sound on the polished floor. The noise of the FOB seemed to vanish, drawn into the intensity of the confrontation. The silence was profound, broken only by the continuous whirring of the server fans. Major Thorne offered the rifle, holding it by the foregrip, the stock resting near his elbow, the ultimate symbol of trust, respect, and mutual operational acknowledgement. "CPL Valdez," Thorne said, using her cover rank, but delivering the highest honor possible between operators. "I believe your standard operating procedure requires you to maintain familiarity with the primary weapons systems in this sector, particularly those configured for low-profile operational deployment. This is my HK-416, configured for immediate deployment. 556 suppressed, battle-ready. Hold the line, operator." Valdez, her eyes reflecting the polished black receiver of the legendary weapon, understood the weight of the gesture. This was not a request for a weapons check. It was a battlefield salute, an immediate, unreserved acknowledgement of mutual membership in the select brotherhood of those who kill silently and sacrifice everything. She gently let the handle of the mop clatter against the metal bucket. She didn't drop it. She placed it down with care, maintaining her composure even while receiving this overwhelming honor. With the practiced, fluid movements of someone who had done this under extreme duress hundreds of times, she accepted the HK-416. Her left hand immediately stabilized the magwell, her right hand instinctively moved toward the pistol grip, her finger indexing safely alongside the trigger guard. She held the rifle naturally, perfectly weighted, a seamless extension of her frame. She shifted the weight imperceptibly, confirming the loaded status of the magazine by feel. It was the most devastating, undeniable act of respect Davis had ever witnessed. The silence stretched, suffocating Sergeant Davis. He was trapped in the glare of the Major's disapproval, staring at a rifle held by a mop pusher who now stood revealed as a combat veteran of the absolute highest caliber. Thorne finally turned his attention to the sergeant, his voice returning to its normal lethal calm. "Sergeant Davis, you denied Corporal Valdez access to the necessary Class 7 materials needed to maintain the chemical sanitation levels required by the JTF directives, which fall under the purview of her mission parameters. This constitutes a direct, negligent interference with a classified NATO operation, punishable under Article 92 of the UCMJ for failure to obey a lawful order, given that her orders were authorized by higher command. Furthermore, your direct personal insult regarding her service record and combat wounds constitutes severe professional misconduct," Davis stammered, attempting one last, pathetic defense. "But, sir, I was just following the inventory protocol, sir. The cost controls—" "The inventory is irrelevant," Thorne cut him off, his voice hardening into steel. "Operational readiness is paramount. Respect for the mission and the personnel executing it is non-negotiable. You have demonstrated neither. You are immediately relieved of duty, pending a full investigation into your adherence to protocol and your conduct toward subordinates. Pack your desk. You will be escorted to the perimeter barracks, pending transfer out of this theater." Thorne addressed Valdez again, the HK-416 still resting securely in her hands. "Corporal Valdez, I apologize for the delay in securing your required materiel. Consider this weapon system your temporary operational equipment until your task is confirmed complete. Complete your decontamination and report to the JTF Command Center once sanitation is confirmed." Valdez nodded, her grip firm and professional on the rifle. The weight of the HK-416 was familiar, comforting, a memory of competence in a world designed for confusion. She turned back to the counter, her eyes fixed on the locked Class 7 cabinet. Without asking, Thorne typed a quick, simple code into the lock. It clicked open. Valdez reached into the restricted supply shelf, pulled out the specialized solvent she needed and the required PPE. She then placed the HK-4116 down gently against the wall, leaning it against the heavy metal shelving. She retrieved her mop and finished filling her bucket with the correct, potent chemical solution, the lethal weapon standing sentinel beside the industrial cleaning tool. She was the paradox of the quiet professional, a mop and a machine gun, equally ready for deployment. She never looked at Davis again. Davis was already being quietly, efficiently escorted out by two imposing MPs, who materialized silently from the hallway, their faces impassive. He watched the corporal, the cleaner, the war hero, dip her mop into the bucket, the reflection of the black Trident scar catching the fluorescent light one last time. He had mistaken a sheath for the absence of a blade, and the consequences of his arrogance were absolute. Valdez pushed the mop bucket away, the clean lines of the logistics bay reflecting her silent victory. She was gone as quickly and efficiently as she had appeared, leaving behind a profound lesson in the sterile silence. The uniform is just fabric. True rank is measured by the sacrifices you make, not the petty power you wield over a supply ledger. Those who have bled for honor carry a quiet, undeniable authority that no administrative sergeant can ever override. In the chaotic, often unjust theater of war, the quiet professionals will always recognize their own, no matter how deep the disguise. If you believe respect is earned by blood and not by rank, type respect in the comments.